Plattsburgh Sustainability Task Force to order. And we'll begin with our agenda, which includes some introductions of our illustrious group. We kind of all got together. Well, you must be Joel. Nice to have you. Thank you so much.
Sorry I'm late.
Oh, no, you're not. Let me see. I think you're 3 minutes late, and that's not late. So I think I'd like to, as you can see, we are live streaming for the public, and I would like the public to put faces to names. So if you could just, we'll start with Mr. Buffett from Clinton Community College. I guess we can start with the mayor.
Sure. Welcome everybody. Colin Reed, Mayor of the City of Plattsburgh.
All right, and then we'll go down the line.
Okay. I'm Scott Buffett. I'm from Clinton Community College, and I'm an assistant professor in wind and renewable energy.
Rochelle Armstrong, coordinator of the Sustainability Task Force, and Councilor Warden 1.
I'm Lauren Eastwood. I'm at SUNY Plattsburgh, associate professor of sociology, and I research climate dynamics.
So I'm Lauder Rietzema. I'm a vice president at CVPH, overseeing quality and information services. I'm an infectious disease physician and have really no inherent knowledge of climate science at all.
But
So
you have an interest, and that's why you're
that's
here.
right.
Joel Chase from City of Plattsburgh Municipal Lighting, engineer over there.
Jim Welch here on behalf of the Building and Zoning Office.
And then Ethan Benson from the Community Development Office.
Thank you very much for coming. Now, you have been so wonderful to volunteer for this. I think you'll find it a challenging and satisfying effort that we're about to make, and the steps that we're going to take as a city to become a carbon neutral community is, I think, a goal that is really important to try to achieve. And I'm just for the benefit of the public, it's not any information that you necessarily will find new, but I put together a little presentation for you that Ethan's going to help me put up, and it'll be part of this record of the meeting. But I'd like to give you a little background. When the Plattsburgh Sustainability Committee, which was just a civic organization, got together and tried to prepare a presentation for the council so that they would become a climate smart community, the green team at Plattsburgh High School came and gave us a much more substantial presentation to serve as a backdrop and explain the immediacy of the necessary action. And so I pulled a few of the slides that Amy Schultes and her students presented to the council, and I think the public needs to understand that the urgency of the climate crisis is what is motivating the establishment of the task force, and we're intent on reducing carbon emissions in city operations. So, so I think the slide was supposed to come up with the 3 reasons if you just push the space bar. Yeah, so yes, climate change is real, we are the cause, yes, we are sure, and we can handle it. I don't know if you've read the news, but I've been particularly concerned that the latest scientific reading of the window during which we have to really meet the challenge of climate change is narrowing all the time. And the most pessimistic predictions are that we have 10, 15 years, if that. It seems to change all the time. So immediate action is necessary, and that's why we're here. And the fact that we have this level of carbon in the atmosphere is something that is an undeniable fact. It's documented fact. If you can see down below, the source is ZB et al. From Nature Geoscience in March 2016. So these are some of the facts that we have to grapple with and keep in the forefront of our minds. Sorry about that. And the next slide. This was a startling fact that was a part of the Green Team's presentation, but it also helps to crystallize just how severe the problem is, also documented by James Hansen, former director of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies. So, you know, these are just one of many, many facts that are easily accessed to support the need for taking pretty drastic action. So these series of slides are just presenting how the warming averages have changed over time. So you can go through the next 3 slides and you can see how our hottest years are increasing. So they're no longer, you know, configured in kind of normal patterns. Okay, Ethan. I had asked Amy if she could include some slides that show the impact on the North Country, and this was one that she offered. And it's, I think, not just, you know, localized to our area, but another trend that's disturbing. Now, we had a little bit of a reprieve so far this year, but last year we had record-setting summer temperatures. This one was really startling to me, and it kind of flies in the face of some people who say, well, our winter this summer was typical, and we had the lake freeze for the first time in forever, and yeah, but the trend certainly doesn't, you know, indicate that we're anywhere near normal, because that is indicative of how the lake has warmed up and how the freezing is something that's become kind of a thing of the past with just a few exceptions. I think you might have read recently that it hit really high temperatures in Anchorage, Alaska. Was it like 85 or 90 in Anchorage, Alaska? So anybody who wants to do further research, it's easy to find a lot of support for the fact that global temperatures are rising and ice and snow is melting at an alarming rate.
Also today, there's less ice in the Arctic than any other time this day in history of recording that.
That's, yeah. These are the kinds of facts that aren't easy to face. And I think it's our job, partly as a task force, to bring them to the forefront of our citizens in our regions, so that, you know, you don't see these things necessarily on the front page of the news. You don't see these facts, you know, in any kind of steady diet that would indicate the emergency that it is. And so it's my belief that as a task force, we can really serve the public to educate them. Go ahead, Ethan. Now here was that, the bit about how it was so much colder. Well, because of the warming in the polar regions, it split the polar vortex, and that caused the unusually cold conditions both in the United States and Canada and Europe. So you tuck away that little bit of trivia just in case anybody wants to offer you the rebuttal that, you know, we did have a cold winter, therefore climate change does not exist. And I put this up just because there is some, I'd say general correspondence to what our local conditions are, and you know, showing that carbon dioxide is the biggest emission, and as you can see below, the contributions that each of those sectors makes. And I think that this is a kind of general way of illustrating how trying to reduce emissions in our governmental operations are an excellent starting point. I mean, if we can find that we can reduce our emissions just in the way that we handle our fleets, we'll make a dent in that percentage of emissions in transportation. You know, we have all kinds of operations that could fit into the category of industry. We'll find ways to help our residents reduce their emissions. So I think that we can take steps that will have a huge impact on the way we, on our carbon footprint. And the next one is the final one. So, you know, the first slide said we can handle it. Well, I think that we will be one of the lead agencies on the forefront of reducing the city of Plattsburgh's impact. And I put the logos for Climate Smart Communities and the mayor's 58 plus plan for energy and economic resilience. I misspelled resilience, dang it. Anyway, and I hope you're as excited about what we can do. And thank you, Ethan, for that. And we'll go on to the business of our agenda. So we're meeting for really 3 major purposes. The first is to kind of take a look at the list of ideas that Nathan and I came up for organizing as a committee. The resolution that was sent to you forming the task force defines our task forces consisting of 7 members and the coordinator and the mayor as ex officio member. I took a stab at establishing a quorum. These are all just suggestions, and I would like your feedback, and we can amend anything. But what we'll do is after we go through the organizational items, we'll vote to ratify it, okay? So I thought that 4 members plus the coordinator or a member from the CD office would be sufficient for holding any votes. That's up for your consideration. Also, that we would meet monthly and that we can set a regular time and day. I will take responsibility for writing up any reports that you need to see regarding our progress toward becoming a climate smart community or achieving any of the mayor's 58 plus points. And I'll also write up minutes of our meeting for you to approve. And the mission statement, let's just say for the sake of this vote that you agree that we'll approve a mission statement. You will be able to revise it as we get to it later in the agenda. And that our goals and recommendations will be consistent with this general mission statement and whatever was set forth in the founding resolution. That I'll present to you goals. Of course, you can suggest them and advise me as to what we should work on, and that we'll pass all of our goals by majority rule. And now I just wonder if you have any additions or revisions to this list of organizing principles.
With the quorum, I think we're fine if, 4 members, 4 out of 7, obviously that's a majority, so I think that makes sense. I don't think we need the 4 plus the coordinator and community development department. I think as long as, unless that means that's tied into that 4 members.
Yeah, and that's a little ambiguous because you're a member.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking that there should be somebody who's been kind of working on the administrative level, which I guess you have, because we're working on a grant together, and that was how I came up with that. What do you recommend, Ethan? Just 4 members?
Honestly, I think 4 members is fine. Unless you, or at least the coordinator out of that 4 members.
As the 4th member?
Yeah,
okay.
as there, so the coordinator can run the meeting.
Okay. So Do you want to state that as an amendment, or does anybody have any different ideas?
Why don't you just strike the rest and just say, because will consist of 4 members, because the coordinator and you are members of the
Okay.
committee.
All right, so let's just stop at coordinator,
So,
period.
were you concerned that there would be times when you wouldn't be able to make it, in which case the
Someone from the CD office.
Yeah, would-
Yeah, you could say, or her alternate, right? I mean, I'm just thinking of sickness, unforeseen circumstances, I plan to be here every time, but,
Mhm.
so what do you think, folks? Is that a consideration?
I think it's gonna be I think it's fine regardless. I think a lot of what we're gonna be doing in the beginning for a while is gonna be just, working on either projects or updating on projects.
Okay.
Less specific resolutions
Simpler
or
is
anything
better.
like that.
Okay.
So
All right,
gives us a little more flexibility.
so I didn't put down that we were run by Robert's Rules of Order. Does anybody want to include that as part of our slate?
Sure.
Okay.
I just have a question. So at the end of the day, are we a decision-making, or are we a recommendation to the city council?
Well,
Or are we either or?
I think you're both. I think that you can recommend initiatives and you can approve initiatives.
But any initiative that impinges upon the domain of the elected officials or affects the budget can only be made by the council, right?
Right. So yes, that's actually really an important point worth noting, that any policies that we decide to formulate, or any laws that we say need to be rewritten, we would make the proposal to the city council to carry out.
So I guess then, and I don't know the right answer, but Robert's Rules of Order would argue you have a motion, you have a second, and then you have a majority vote.
Right.
And the question is, with such a small group, are we better functioning on a consensus basis? We're just, we're not making high-level magnitude
Right.
decisions. We're making recommendations that at the end of the day are gonna be subject to Robert's Rules of Orders. I guess I don't feel, it feels a bit formal to this group,
Right.
but I could be wrong.
So we can take care of that by consensus down below in the 5th point, by consensus, and then that might imply that we will not need the formal motion-making apparatus to run ourselves. Does that seem workable? Okay. Any other additions or changes?
A provision in there to amend these guidelines, that it's the full board, if we want to change the way this is set up, to have the full board present to change these guidelines.
Okay, so let me add a full board,
Should something not be working, the ability to change the guidelines.
thank you, will decide upon the need to change organizational guidelines? Okay, anything else? All right, so just to review, we're ending the second point with coordinator, and there's a period. We're on the last bullet, we're deleting majority rule and replacing it with consensus. And then I'm adding another bullet point, a full board will decide upon the need to change organizational guidelines. Is that satisfactory? Right, and I guess I'll just ask for any dissenting votes, whether we need to work on somebody to achieve consensus. Okay, so I think we're set. All right, so the next item on the agenda is the mission statement, and this is, it's not plagiarized. It's a recommended format that I found on the Climate Smart Communities task force webpage, and it just states an overarching general statement that captures what our more detailed objectives are as they're reflected in the Climate Smart Communities checklist and the mayor's 58 plus point plan. That's a mouthful always. I'm going to read it out loud for the purpose of the public. The Plattsburgh Sustainability Task Force will act as an advisory board to assist the city in achieving its goals to reduce carbon emissions through energy and resource conservation. Its general mission, elaborated in its founding resolution, will be to develop a strategy and work plan for, delete the two, establishing a baseline for the city's current emissions, for recommending reduction targets, and for,
No, I think that's correct, actually.
it was for identifying new strategies for reductions and energy efficiency, and for recommending ways in which these strategies can be incorporated into the city's economic development and planning efforts. Any suggestions?
You ought to get that done in about 3 meetings, right?
All we have to do is do it now. Oh, you mean all of those?
All of those
All
things,
those
3
stated
meetings.
missions.
Should
Oh,
be
yeah.
a piece of cake.
So, hearing no suggestions, I'm going to say that this, by consensus, we're accepting this mission statement. Yeah, it was just Saugerties. They did a good job. Okay, so I sent you, I think it was last week, an annotated version of the Climate Smart Community Action List. I think I sent you the resolution that founded our task force and also the mayor's 58-point plan. And these are the particulars of what we're going to be doing. One of our major goals will be to achieve climate smart community certification. If we'll just take a look at the checklist here that's on the graph first. As you can see, we've already earned 30 points by just forming as a task force and appointing a coordinator. And the next set, PE2, inventory emissions, set goals, and plan for climate action. These are on our list to do, and a little bit later, I hope Ethan will help me tell you more about the grant that we're applying for and just what the GHG emissions inventory entails and the development of the climate action plan. But as you can see, and I thank Mayor Reed for, kind of basing his projections for what is achievable in the will-do column, because of what we've already done and because of what seems easy to do, there is every possibility that we will achieve certification in a short period of time. Now, our goal will be to achieve certification by January 5th, 2020. That's the next round where there's a cutoff for certification. And so that, I hope, will be a goal that we can mutually agree to.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So the numbers under the will do column, could you, I don't know what the numbers mean, or B, what it
Okay.
means when there's no number there.
So, okay, so if you look starting from the left, and there's a little description of the action.
Mhm.
The total possible points are 20, and then you can see that already doing for the first item was 20. So we already have received the 20. Now that's why the will do column
Okay.
isn't set up. But for the National Regional Climate Program, I think the mayor just took the leap of faith of saying that that's something that we can do, and there's 3 possible points, and we should be able to achieve those points. Stepping down to the next section, government operations GHG inventory. Well, we're in the process of writing a grant, and we should embark on that effort. So I think that's why when the mayor took a look at this action checklist, he put that as a, that's a probable action. That's on our list, and so that's what we will do. Now, these are all subject to our review and modification. And
If there's a line in which there's, so for instance, PE3 action, the 5th one.
okay, hold on, let me catch up with you. 1, 2.
It's the first line that has blanks. So I just want to understand what the blanks mean, that those are unlikely to be achieved because of budgetary concerns or whatever. What does it mean when there's no points in there?
Well, the state will give you 1 to 5 points. That's something to keep in mind. But when the mayor was kind of forecasting what it was within our capability of doing fairly quickly, he left that one alone, and you can ask the mayor what he based his judgment on.
I'm not questioning the judgment. I just want to understand how the numbers get there.
And
Yeah.
there's a certain amount of subjectivity to this, but things that we've already talked about, already are doing, or in the works of doing, and things that I thought we could complete by this
Sure,
year, I
okay,
put them
fair
in the
enough.
already doing category. Things that we've actually discussed and are working on the strategies for, or have shown already an interest in it, I put in the will do category. And then things that are blank, there's just things we haven't discussed
We
yet,
haven't even
but
contemplated.
they're open for discussion.
Okay, that's fair
and
enough. I
should be included.
just trying to understand how.
Yeah, this actually was, if we would have printed out the whole thing, I think you would have been able to see that nothing was off the table. It's just for the
Yeah.
sake of printing for this document, all other designations were left off. But yes, it's totally up to us to make any goals and set any kinds of, plans to achieve an action. And I encourage you to visit the Climate Smart Communities website to find out more about the program. Some of these programs and action items are listed in a way that you can get a better feel for what's involved. But the ones that we're going to be dealing with most immediately will have to do with completing the grant, and I'll get to that in a minute. And then deciding what our priorities are, really. What are the things that we can accomplish, as the mayor said, that we've already begun to do and all we need to document. So I say setting priorities after we kind of do a review of the action checklist and so forth will be one of our biggest efforts.
So under the type status, is that determined by the Climate Smart program?
Yes.
Or is it, because then I see the CFC grants,
I think
or
that,
under review.
right, some of these are still under review in terms of how the DEC is going to regard their achievement.
Okay.
Some have CSC grants on them just because you can apply for grants. So let's say we do or we don't get the grant to do the Climate Smart Action Plan or the GHG inventory, we can apply again next round, which will be next July. And we will probably by that time be in a really good position to see what kind of other Climate Smart community grants we might want to explore.
And one of the things of getting these points and becoming certified is you get preferential treatment when you apply for other grants. So while we're currently we're going to discuss applying for a grant for a greenhouse gas inventory, down the line once we become certified, we get preferential treatment for doing a much more expansive or physical project. So that's a big purpose of going through this, not just because it's good for the environment and for the government and the community on some of these to just improve its environmental standing, but it helps us further and fund bigger and larger projects down the line.
This might be a good segue, Ethan, to talk about the grant we're applying for, because though I didn't note it, I would like to get the committee's feedback about the grant, and I'd like to reach consensus about its application. You wanna?
Okay, yeah, I'll take the floor. So as Rochelle had mentioned, we are looking to apply for a grant for a government operations greenhouse gas inventory, as well as a government operations climate action plan, and then at the same time conduct a fleet inventory and develop a fleet efficiency policy. So the purpose of the grant is essentially to allow us to get a technical consultant with a lot of experience in how some of these reports need to be laid out, how it needs to be organized, the best way to collect the data, so that someone really to help guide and focus that effort and our efforts and the various city departments' efforts going forward. So that was a big reason with this grant. So what's going to happen is we would have that consultant who would participate for, we're going to say $30,000 worth, and then between the city staff and our volunteer time, that's going to be our in-kind match to even out the grant. And with these, you see it's in the PE2 for inventory, emissions, setting goals, and planning for climate action. Everything we're doing is in PE2 and PE3. So it's very early on stuff that allows us, so we get this greenhouse gas inventory for the city, for the government. So now we can determine what do we need to do to reduce this, and we can make that action plan, and then we have more action items that we as a task force can accomplish or delegate. So that's really the importance, is just starting off and having that baseline of information for not our government, and then maybe in the future the community, but right now we're going to focus on the government, and then figure out what we can do with, let's say, the fleets, the fleet inventory, with the, is there things that we can do with certain departments to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, etc.
I even noticed that on this list, and this is something the mayor and I had talked about, the idea of developing anti-idling policies for the city fleet. So that's kind of a specific action that could be taken in the development of a policy like that.
And all these actions are listed in that resolution which formed our task force, and it's something that we are going to accomplish with or without the grant, but ideally we get the grant to help support it and make it flow and function a lot better. So with the grant application process, it's through the state CFA process, so you have various state departments, ESD, DOS, DEC, which is running the climate smart communities. It's a big pool of money with a bunch of different projects, with a bunch of different grant applications. You apply, you find out around December if you receive funding or not, and then you go from there. So if we do decide to apply for this grant, which we should, because we're going to go embark on this work regardless, I think we would still have, the next 5 or so months to first organize what we want to do as a task force, as well as accomplishing other things on this, the will do or already doing category. So to move forward to certification. So there's still a lot. You see this, and DEC is constantly adding more each day. Probably not each day, but you get the idea. For tasks and other things that we can do, not just as a government, but as a body here. So I think there'll be plenty of work to do for all of us.
So so this first round, it sounds like you can continually apply
Yep.
for accelerating or new grant opportunities through this. Could you give me an idea of the magnitude? So for instance, the first round, what are the magnitudes of the awards?
Well, it depends on what kind of tasks you're applying for, and you can't apply for grant funding for some of these later, bigger items until you've done some of the smaller, like
Right.
greenhouse gas inventory. So, an example: some cities apply for $10,000 worth to do some of this work. Some do 40,000. Some do X amount. Other communities, they applied for hundreds of thousands of dollars to do a whole new bicycle, pedestrian plan. There's the scale really can fluctuate, and it depends on the state's standards. On the Climate Smart Communities website specifically, they do break that down a little bit more. I'm going to see if I just have last year's grant awardees, just as an example. Sorry, I got a lot of paper. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, we got down the city of Ithaca applied for downtown demand management association for about $500,000. But we're talking, once we accomplish and get certified, there's large projects that we could be eligible for and that we may, as a city and a task force and just general planning procedures, really think's a good idea. And we can't apply for those funding or get that preferential treatment until we accomplish these other goals.
Right.
So, if that helps.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
And some of the items in this grant that you're applying for now, they're kind of near the top of this inventory, the things that we'd have a difficult time mounting the organized effort right out of the box to do it. And yet they're big point getters that obviously the climate smart communities people are saying, we really want you to accomplish these guys first. So that's where I think your strategy is going, is get some help to really get going. Then after that, I think we'd be in a better position to apply for grants directly ourselves and implement them ourselves, etc. But this, we need to just kind of get to that point of getting certified to be eligible for the grants that Ethan was talking about.
Yeah, for an example, Montgomery County, they had a grant received for $2 million for facility relocation. So there's sizable projects in the future. But obviously there's these things like the greenhouse gas inventory. It's still important for us to determine what our baselines are and what things that we can do to improve.
So basically, it's the ones under PE2 that are our priority first goal.
Yep. So you really just get those first steps, because that's just how the program usually works. We get these first steps in. You accomplish a lot of these baseline / initial planning, and that's what the climate action plan, whether it's for the government or the community, that really then breaks down more tasks, which would, maybe accomplish some of these other tasks later on. But each community is a little different, so, and that's why it's important to pick those out in the beginning. It really gives us a game plan or a way forward, and really helps just organize our efforts.
Any other questions? Well, then I'd ask for an agreement that you are endorsing the application of this grant.
And one more caveat to it, the grant is, obviously we're gonna be spending time as a task force and some of the city staff on our own time as well, and work time. And so that's, as I mentioned before, is that in-kind match. There will be, beyond these meetings, efforts that we're gonna need to take, but it sounds like, especially for the majority of people here, or everyone here, that there's concern about the environment or an eagerness for the work that we're undergoing. So that's just a heads up. There might be things like time tracking that might have to occur, more little tedious in that nature, but it's just something that's required. So
Yes, that's important too, to state outright. I'm anticipating that a question is coming. No? Okay. So is everyone in agreement that they're endorsing this idea to apply for the grant?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Thank you very much. So I'm gonna backtrack. We did say we would meet monthly at a regular time. Do you want to arrange that on a monthly basis, or do you want to set a monthly meeting time and date? Because I'm sure we can provide a doodle poll so that can kind of maybe allow you to have a little bit more flexibility in your planning.
I'll do what's best for everybody.
Okay.
Yeah, not here to argue.
Yeah. Thank you. We've got some community members who maybe have some constraints on their schedules. Is there a day or time that you anticipate might be better for you guys?
Yes.
I'll look up the fall schedule.
You have a fall schedule. You have that already?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
That's what I
So
was
shall
just
we
doing.
say that we're gonna use email and doodle poll to set monthly meetings? Is that possible?
And I mean, we're just, to follow up the meeting law, we'll just make sure that we let the media know and
Right.
the public know that we're
Alright.
having
So-
a meeting so they can all show up and participate.
We're gonna try to get a handle on, how our community members' time is being taken up
So-
and,
Are we gonna do meeting by meeting, or are we gonna try to lay out a program, if you will? of
I
meetings?
think that's what we need to do, but I think there's a few people that need to consult their schedules before we can do that. So we'll do that online, and say we're meeting in August. Can we make an August meeting according to your schedule, Scott?
Yes.
Okay, so you wanna set our August meeting, and then we'll report back about our time constraints at that time and set our regular monthly meetings. So, do you wanna try for the third week in August?
So
No,
that
that-
would be like 19 through 23?
Yes. Sorry, guys, I'm trying to come up to speed here. We need to go to the next one. Yeah, so that would be the 19th through the 23rd. Does Tuesday work best for everybody? No?
Tuesday general is not a good day
Okay.
for me. In the late afternoon, I do a lot of evening meetings on Tuesdays.
All right.
Wednesdays are always good for me. Not always.
Are good?
Wednesday? Does
Sure.
Wednesday work for you, the 21st?
Yes.
All right, does the same time frame work for you, or? Yeah,
I always prefer a little later, but I understand that other people
Okay.
may not, so.
can we have another suggestion then? What time frame are you looking at, 4?
Even just 4 o'clock.
So
is
4 o'clock would be better, is
easier.
that agreeable to everyone?
Does that work for you folks?
Because that means a little bit more of your private time.
Mhm.
Thank you so much. So we'll say did you get that?
21st at
The
4.
21st at 4. All right. So, as Ethan said, we are going to wait for our grant results before we formally embark upon the GHG inventory, which needs to come first before the climate action plan. So I'm gonna make a suggestion and then just kind of elicit your further suggestions. I'm saying that we study this list of climate action checklist and even access, I can provide a link to the original. And maybe we can fully familiarize ourselves with the program and as well as the mayor's 58 plus point plan, and come back with ideas for setting priorities. Does that sound reasonable?
Can I ask a follow-up question? You
Sure.
may have already covered this. When are you submitting the grants? And
It's-
then what kind of turnaround time do you anticipate?
They're due Friday at 4 p.m. Ideally, you have it way before, because the system gets bogged down because you have a lot of people who wait the 11th hour, and we're gonna try to avoid that. So hopefully we apply late Thursday or early Friday morning.
So this week?
Yes,
This
week.
week,
Okay.
we've got to
And-
apply.
and
And we've
then-
already started on it,
Yes,
so.
we have, Rochelle has done a ton of work. I'm slacking a little bit. I'll pick it up. I know
No, you're
I'm a
not.
lazy person. So we'll get that all done, and the turnaround time is around December.
Oh, wow.
So
Okay.
We
that's
should know
when
by
they-
December.
That's when they do the grant awards.
Right.
And they'll have like the state likes to do their, really make a good example and like show all the different projects and all that. And there's like an award booklet.
Sound the trumpets.
Yes.
Okay.
So notice in the inventory that the actual results of this grant are in the will do category, because I knew that they wouldn't be able to generate data for us until next year. And as you said, the deadline is really the end of this year or early next year. So especially focus on these things that we feel we can do, or our associated community group, which I think Dr. Eastwood and Councilor Armstrong are also on, things that the community group can also be doing in the meantime before the end of the year for our certification
Right.
purposes.
I think it's a reasonable possibility to say that we can be certified by January 5th. That could be a goal.
As we get deeper into some of these projects we already have underway.
Mhm.
That's That's right.
Okay.
That's right, a lot of them
Is
you've
there
already had underway.
the-
For instance, you're almost fully, a stoplight, LED
Yeah.
converted.
So
That's-
all that is required is that you provide documentation that I submit to the state, and we can get points
That was my
for
next,
it.
do they have to come and do an inspection, or we send out a
No,
certification
we
and
just
that's it?
submit our documentation and then enter it into the portal.
Is there a partial award of points if the system is partially converted?
There's different, for a lot of these different projects, there's different scales. So for like a greenhouse gas inventory, there's a scope 1, there's a scope 2, and there's a scope 3. Scope 1 would be, let's say, 1 point. It's very
Basic.
basic. Scope 2 is a lot more in depth, and scope 3 and entails a lot more deeper research into maybe certain kind of emissions at, let's say, the water resource recovery facility. So all these, they do have different criteria. You can get different points. So when it comes to if something's only done to a certain degree, we would have to check with that actual task if it matches. But
Okay.
for most things, there should be partial credit, if you will.
Okay.
And there's a lot of things that you are already doing that I've put on the 58-point plan that aren't even included in the certification process yet, but are still consistent, or you could maybe argue they're involved in
They're
some
part
way or
of,
another.
yes, okay. Okay.
We're kind of far ahead of the game because we've already
Looking
got,
at it, we're in good shape
municipal
to-
lighting,
yeah.
Can I ask
Absolutely.
another informational
Sure.
question, just to bring me up to speed on where we are in terms of something that had been raised when we were working on the microgrid project up at SUNY Plattsburgh a couple of years ago, and it had to do with the NIPA contracts and our inability to create energy through photovoltaic or wind. So is that still a part of those contracts? Or I know that residents of the city of Plattsburgh were asking during our public comment meetings in that process, you know, why they were not able to install photovoltaics or that kind of thing. And we were responding that it had, and a lot of this was Bill Tracy saying that there were contracts that we could not be creating energy through other means because we have the NIPA agreement.
There's the NIPA agreement, and then there's also the Public Service Commission that sets our rates. So I think anybody can install the photovoltaic, but
You
the
can't be
city,
hooked
the
into-
municipal lighting department does not have to buy that power.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know if you were at that meeting, Joe, but we
No.
had a recent
Yeah.
summit meeting with NIMPA and the Albany and Syracuse
And that may
folks
be,
and
yeah.
everybody. And they said there could actually be a provision that we could start generating power and putting it back in the grid. The issue would
Oh,
be
wow.
what price we could
Sure.
receive selling it back.
That was a great.
But we
There's-
could, as long as we had a device that conformed to the right underwriting standards,
Right.
would be permitted to do it.
I
So
see.
that's actually quite a
Yeah.
leap, because before they didn't see a pathway to even doing it.
There's
Interesting.
no
So
tariff.
Colin, when you say we, do you mean we the city or we as individual
We as individuals,
customers?
and it was through the coordination of the MLD and all that kind of
So
stuff.
the current status is if I put photovoltaic in, I couldn't sell that power back to the city?
Right.
And my understanding was there would be some question about whether you would even be allowed to do that and hook up to the grid because of that.
Right, I think we've got an understanding that we're going to develop protocols where that's going to be permitted.
Okay.
And maybe even
There's-
be able to sell it back at the wholesale
The
rate rather
Public
than.
Service Commission has to create a tariff
Yeah.
for the municipal electrics.
Okay.
Currently, there's no tariff.
And the
and
other
then they
thing
have
that.
to
So
we
is this to prevent the idea that you'd have to pay normal going rates for electricity
That's
as opposed to what the municipal, so you'd be paying more back than, okay.
That's right, and that, as a matter of fact, the whole state has converted, you're describing a system called net metering. The whole state at the end of this year has moved away from net metering and into another more complicated, a DAR, or some sort of more complicated formula that probably will ultimately be less advantageous to residents. And this obviously is something much bigger than a city or municipal lighting department. It's a state policy, but there is gonna be some mechanism. Also at that meeting, we're part of an IEEP, it's an energy efficiency incentive program. And we've always been part of that. It's part of, if you look on your month's bill, I think 0.1 cents per kilowatt hour goes to this fund. And they've been up to now funding people who wanna convert to heat pumps, some of your upgrading motors and variable frequency drives, been through that program,
Yes.
any energy efficiency things, and each homeowner has access to that right now. But they also said that they would allow us to use funds to upgrade some of the vehicles in our fleet to electric, the difference between gas and electric, for instance.
Wow.
So your association is really, really willing to work with us on this. And we're the largest member actually of the association, which I think is one reason why they're willing to send everybody up to Plattsburgh to discuss new ways to look at this. And I'd say after that meeting, I'd characterize them as very helpful and very eager to help.
Okay.
We're open-minded.
They're very open-minded, yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So some of the concerns you might have heard in the past, I think we're starting to dissolve them away.
I think that's a news item.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that is
Yeah.
so promising.
And I would like to understand those dynamics a little bit better, but I'm not sure that this is the forum to engage in that discussion. But
Right.
that helps. I mean, there's so many items on this list that have points associated with them that we wouldn't be able to do if we didn't have access to those options.
The other outcome of that meeting, by the way, was we said, we'd really like to be 100% energy greenhouse gas, non-using energy, sustainable energy in our country. And because we're already with 97%, and we for about 3% of the additional energy credits we go and buy in the futures market like everybody else does. So I said, wouldn't it be great if those remaining 3% we could buy sustainable energy credits too? And they said, sure, okay. And by the next day, they showed us a proposal for how we could have that done. And the next council meeting, they passed it. Sustainable energy. We're the seventh city in the entire country
Wow.
that had that done. It all happened within a week because this group was able to figure out a pathway for us to do it.
So could you explain what that means?
That would be good.
I don't work in this, so when you say 100% sustainable energy, what exactly does that
Well,
mean?
as you know, 97% of our energy already comes from hydroelectric, so it's
Correct.
sustainable. It's coming from, many people think it's the St. Lawrence dams, but it's actually the Niagara dams, correct? Although all the energy gets kind of mixed up,
Yeah.
as
Yep.
we know on the grid. But so when we have the very cold days in the winter, we'll have to go out and buy a little bit of extra energy beyond our contract from the Niagara dams. And for that 3%, we have energy finance experts go out and buy future supplies of that energy amongst our association. We share it all with our association in case that day occurs. It's an option to buy that extra power. And now we've just clarified and said, when you go out and do it, we want you to make sure you're buying from people who are generating from windmills or solar voltaic commercial plants, etc. And it costs a little bit more, but by the time you look at it on your kilowatt hour basis, it's like 1/10 of a cent or less or something. So it's not really significant, but I think there's a strong value that we have that we would like to be 100% if we're already about 97%. So that happened very quickly. The lawyer with your association and the finance guy who does the buying of these future energy credits were all in that same summit, and they got together and figured out a way to do it. And like I say, a few days later it was done. I think it turned out that the first set of credits we bought were actually from Clinton County source, the windmills. So it's kind of
Great.
cool.
So promising.
Is that about right, Joel? Joel's
No,
more than I am.
I'm looking in here
You're
to
not
see
getting any points for that.
if in here is any points for that.
No, see, well, we're only the 7th in the nation and only the 1st in all of New York State, so I don't think it was even contemplated, but imagine how many points you should be able to give for a city that becomes 100% electrical energy self-sustaining, so.
Right.
Renewable.
But you're right, there's a lot of things that we're doing that are really along the lines of what a sustainable community ought to do that aren't quite baked into the certification list yet.
So going back to the first slide that Amy Schultes and her green team presented to us in April, the circumstances are dire. They're not anything that we shouldn't approach in any other way than as an emergency. And
yes, there's something we can do with it. And thank you so much for being a part of concrete, measurable steps to solve the challenge of climate crisis. Thank you for coming. I guess we just need to agree that we're all done unless anybody has something else to add. No? Okay, thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll see you
Thanks
next
for the
month.
work that you've been doing on the
The
grant.
21st.
Sounds good.
Municipal electric utility.